If he never wakes up, we won't have to share a single dollar. That's what my wife said. I'll never forget the night I realized my wife wasn't praying for me to live. She was waiting for me to die. That was the moment my world shattered, and I couldn't move a muscle to stop it. They said I was in a coma. To the world, I was just a body hooked up to machines in a sterile hospital suite, a man they called a tragedy, a headline, a warning. But inside, I was wide awake, eyes shut, limbs useless. But every word they said, I heard it all. My name is Jackson Cole. I built NovaGrid from the ground up. From a dusty Detroit garage to a national energy powerhouse. I had calluses on my hands long before I had a title on a door. I spent 2 decades trying to do what others said couldn't be done. Build a clean energy solution that didn't answer to the oil titans or the Wall Street kings. And just when I was on the verge of changing everything, they tried to erase me. It was a private plane crash. No warning, no distress signal. One minute I was flying home from a field test in Nevada, the next, fire, metal, silence. They told the press I barely survived, that I'd never wake up. They were wrong. 4 nights after the crash, I woke up in the dark. My body didn't work. My voice was gone, but my mind was screaming. And then I heard them. Through the hospital glass, just outside my room, my wife Evelyn, my partner in life, my supposed anchor, and Trevor Banks, my cousin, my COO, the man I once trusted with my company. I've already scheduled the board vote, Trevor said. Once we invoke the mental incapacitation clause, we control NovaGrid. I felt something then, something I hadn't felt since childhood. Not fear, fury, but it got worse. Evelyn's voice, so calm, so familiar, turned to ice. What about Rebecca Lang? His attorney? She's loyal. I'd have planted enough evidence to keep her tangled in an ethics investigation for months. They weren't just planning to replace me. They were planning to bury my name, my vision, my legacy. I wanted to scream, to move, to fight. Instead, I lay still, listening. And I made a decision right then. Until I knew everyone involved, I would play the part they wrote for me. The silent titan, the man on the edge of death. But I wasn't dying. I was preparing. They changed my nurse without warning. One evening, just after midnight, I heard the soft hiss of the door sliding open, quieter than usual. The room was already dim, shadows painted across the walls by the blinking monitors beside me. Then I heard her. "Good evening, Mr. Cole," she said gently, her voice calm, almost too calm. She didn't sound like the others. No forced cheerfulness, no robotic professionalism. Her voice had weight, purpose. "My name's Kara," she continued. "I'll be your night nurse." She walked with a steady rhythm, not rushed, not distracted. I couldn't see her, of course. Not really, my eyes were still sealed shut by the paralysis. But I could sense something different about her from the moment she entered. She didn't treat me like a vegetable. She saw me. She checked my IV, touched my wrist lightly, then paused. Long enough for me to wonder if she was staring, listening. Then she spoke again, but this time her voice dropped to a whisper. "Don't know if you can hear me," she said, "but something's not right." My chest tightened. She kept her hands busy while she talked, adjusting the monitor, logging vitals. "They changed your chart. Your sedation levels are double what they should be. Reflex responses are inconsistent. Whoever wrote these notes didn't expect someone like me to look closely." For the first time since the crash, I felt more than anger, more than pain. I felt hope. Kara leaned closer, almost like she was speaking to herself. "I wasn't supposed to be assigned to you. The previous nurse was removed without explanation 3 nights ago. I asked questions, got vague answers. Then she said something that changed everything. I'm not just a nurse. I have a background in neuroforensics, and what I'm seeing doesn't make sense." I didn't move. Not yet, but I listened harder than I ever had in my life. "Someone's keeping you under," she whispered. Deliberately, quietly. "It's not just malpractice, it's methodical." She didn't know it yet, but she had just become my lifeline. She stood, lingered another moment, then quietly exited the room. I wanted to scream out, "Stay, please. You're the only one who sees me." But all I could do was wait. The next night she returned. Same time, same scent. Clean, subtle, like pine and linen. Not perfume, something grounded, real. I gathered every ounce of focus I had. My body was still a prison, but I had found a crack in the wall. I concentrated everything into one finger, my right index. She moved near the bed to adjust my IV. I twitched. Once. She froze. Slowly, she leaned down. Her breath was unsteady. "You can hear me," she said softly, eyes wide. "That was you." I twitched again. "Yes," she gasped, then smiled, the kind of smile that holds both relief and fear. "Okay," she whispered. "We'll need a system." One twitch for yes, two for no. Blink once to confirm. I blinked, and for the first time in nearly 3 weeks, I stopped being a passive body. I became a witness with a voice, silent, yes, but not powerless. Over the next few nights, we worked in the shadows. She brought in a laminated alphabet card, the kind used in old recovery wards. She'd point, letter by letter. I'd blink or twitch when she hit the right one. It was slow, exhausting, but it was communication. The first word I spelled, Evelyn, then Trevor. She read the letters out loud, brows furrowed. "Your wife and your COO." One twitch. Yes, I could see the realization forming in her eyes, the pieces falling into place. "Why?" she asked, half to herself. It took nearly 15 minutes, but I told her, "Pulsecore." Her expression changed instantly. Everyone at Novagrid knew Pulsecore. It was the project that kept me up at night. A decentralized energy solution designed to power rural communities and disaster zones. Cheap, clean, and scalable. A direct threat to billion-dollar monopolies who'd rather keep people dependent. She looked at me like she understood more than just the science. "They want to steal it," she said quietly, "and silence you for good." I twitched once. Yes, from that night forward, we were no longer patient and nurse. We were co-conspirators in truth. Each night she stayed longer, helped me move small muscles again, fingers, then toes, tracked my progress, hid the real numbers from the doctors. She had courage I hadn't expected to find in this cold place, and me, for the first time since they tried to kill me, I felt something real. I wasn't alone. Kara Miles didn't sleep that night either. She sat in her studio apartment, coffee going cold in her favorite mug, one her father gave her before he passed. It read, "Stand for what's right even when your knees shake." They were shaking now. She had reviewed Jackson Cole's latest response on the letterboard again and again. Keep them talking. It wasn't just a plea, it was strategy. And so the next evening, when she stepped into room 619, her posture was calm, composed, but under her uniform, taped inside her pocket, was a miniature voice recorder, no bigger than a lipstick tube. As she adjusted Jackson's IV and checked his vitals, she whispered, "They're planning to move me, maybe tomorrow, but tonight we get proof." Jackson's eyes remained shut. He twitched once. Yes, at exactly 10:07 p.m., as if fate were following a cue, voices echoed just beyond the door. "I'm telling you, she's not just a nurse," said Trevor. His voice was clipped, agitated. "She's asking questions that have nothing to do with post-trauma care." Another voice, calmer, older, Dr. Voss. "She has no authority. Just keep her out of the sedation protocols." "I don't care how you do it," Trevor snapped, "but we need the brain death certification signed by Thursday. The board votes Friday. This has to look airtight." There was a pause. Then Voss muttered, "If Cole wakes up, the fallout." "He won't." The voices faded down the corridor. Kara quietly ended the recording and slipped it back into her pocket. Jackson twitched once. He had heard everything. They weren't just planning to take over. They were preparing to erase him permanently. The next night, Kara didn't come alone. At 11:30 p.m., she returned with Dr. Nora Jensen, an independent neurodiagnostic specialist she'd worked with during a military case 2 years earlier. Nora was brisk, sharp-eyed, and meticulous, not the kind of doctor easily swayed or intimidated. They locked the door behind them. "I've got about 30 minutes before Voss starts making rounds," Nora said, already unpacking equipment. "Let's see what they're hiding." She ran a full neuroscan, cross-referencing the readings with Jackson's reported chart data. Her frown deepened by the second. "These numbers are cooked," she said flatly. "His EEG shows high cognitive activity. Reflexes are intact. No sign of vegetative state. Whoever marked this as minimal response is lying." She turned to Kara. "This isn't negligence. It's intentional suppression. Someone is sedating him just enough to keep him beneath the threshold of legal consciousness." Kara's voice was quiet but firm. "That's criminal." Nora nodded. "We'll need chain of custody documentation, lab logs, pharmacy polls, and we need to move fast." For the next 6 days, Jackson trained in secret. Every night, Kara helped him practice. Tiny movements at first. A finger, then a toe, then lifting his hand a full inch off the bed before collapsing in exhaustion. Kara fed him protein through an IV-enhanced drip. Nora monitored his vitals discreetly from her own clinic. Slowly, the man who once stared down billion-dollar investors in three-piece suits was clawing his way back, one breath, one nerve signal at a time. On the 7th night, Jackson gave Kara a new message. "I need to stand." She stared at him for a moment, her chest tight, then nodded. "We'll do it, together." But time was running out. Trevor had scheduled the vote. Evelyn had filed for legal guardianship, citing irreversible neurological decline. The walls were closing in. It was on the 9th night that Kara entered with fire in her step. She leaned in and whispered, "We have a window." Then another voice answered from the door. "I'm in, and I've brought backup." Rebecca Lang, her voice soft and commanding, filled the room like a hymn in a church hall. Jackson blinked in stunned recognition. His childhood friend, his fiercest defender, still fighting. Rebecca held up a black folder. "We traced the financials, shell companies tied to offshore accounts, payments to Dr. Voss, consulting fees to a tech firm that doesn't exist." She lowered her voice. "And that firm is registered to a name we all know, Trevor's father-in-law. It's a cover for funneling money into a corporate sabotage." Kara exhaled slowly. The noose was tightening, but this time around the right necks. Rebecca knelt beside Jackson. "Can you walk?" Jackson blinked once. "Not yet. But I will." And so the preparations began. The team of 3, Kara, Nora, and Rebecca, worked around the clock. They created a secure communication relay, filed preliminary complaints with the state medical board under pseudonyms, and prepped Jackson's medical records for formal submission to federal authorities. But above all, they gave him time. Time to recover, time to strengthen, time to rise. Because this wasn't just about one man's survival. It was about taking back everything that was stolen. His name, his company, and his vision for a world that valued progress. The boardroom at NovaGrid headquarters was dressed for betrayal. Mahogany-paneled walls gleamed under soft lighting. A fresh fruit platter sat untouched at the far end of the polished oak table. The chairs were filled with board members who'd flown in from Boston, Atlanta, and San Francisco, all under the guise of a routine vote. But today's agenda was anything but routine. Trevor Banks stood near the head of the table, crisp in a tailored gray suit, playing the part of dutiful COO. His smile was tight, controlled. Beside him sat Evelyn Cole, widow-in-waiting, wearing a tasteful black dress, not funereal, but solemn enough to project heartbreak. Her diamond earrings caught the light every time she dabbed her dry eyes with a linen handkerchief. She didn't cry. She performed. "Ladies and gentlemen," Trevor began, projecting steady confidence, "thank you for joining us on such short notice. As you know, Jackson Cole's condition remains critical. Per Article 9.2 of our charter, we must act in the company's best interest if a sitting CEO is deemed mentally incapacitated." He gestured to the large screen behind him. Dr. Voss's report outlines the extent of Mr. Cole's irreversible neurological damage. You've all received copies. If there are no objections, we'll proceed to vote on the transfer of executive power, effective immediately. A quiet murmur filled the room. Some faces looked concerned, others indifferent. All were tired of uncertainty. Then a voice cut through the hum. Just one question. Heads turned. It was Rebecca Lang, the only board member who had worked with Jackson since day one. Her tone was calm, but her eyes burned. Why isn't Dr. Voss here to present the report himself? Trevor's composure faltered just a touch. He was called to an emergency consult, but the report is self-explanatory, Rebecca interrupted, raising an eyebrow. Like the offshore accounts in his name? Trevor froze. Evelyn's lips pressed into a thin line. And then, before anyone could speak, the double doors swung open. The room fell silent. Standing in the doorway, flanked by two people in black suits, was a man no one expected to see again. Jackson Cole, alive, awake, dignified. He wore a navy blue suit, crisp white shirt, no tie. One hand rested on a sleek carbon fiber cane, the other at his side. His posture wasn't perfect, but his presence was undeniable. Whispers rippled like wind through wheat. A chair scraped the floor. One board member gasped audibly. Trevor's voice cracked. That's not possible. Jackson took a slow step forward, then another. The two people behind him followed. Kara Miles, wearing a sharp blazer instead of scrubs, and Dr. Nora Jensen, holding a locked black case. Following them, calm as a rising tide, was Diana Solis, Jackson's newly appointed legal counsel. She carried a thick folder and a gaze that said, "Don't even try me." Jackson's voice, when it came, was steady and low, the kind of voice forged in fire and silence. Voss, he said, is currently being interviewed by federal authorities for conspiracy and falsifying medical documents. He paused to look around the room. Thanks to the courage of a few good people, I'm here, and I'm awake. And what you're voting on today isn't leadership, it's a hostile takeover. Trevor tried to regain footing. This is absurd. He's been unconscious for weeks. The data, Dr. Jensen stepped forward and opened her case. Independent neurological evaluations, EEG scans, blood toxicology reports, all show clear cognitive function as of 12 days ago. The only reason Mr. Cole wasn't speaking sooner was sedation administered outside of protocol. Rebecca Lang stepped forward, voice sharp as glass. You tried to bury your own blood with sedatives and signatures. Evelyn stood now, her facade cracking. My husband nearly died. And yet, Jackson said, voice now cold as steel, my plane crashed after a perfect inspection. Just days before you submitted a motion to change the company charter, without my signature. Diana handed out documents to each board member. Here are transcripts of communications between Mrs. Cole and Mr. Banks, referencing a permanent solution and concerns over a project called Pulsecore. The board members flipped through the pages. Some faces turned pale. Trevor's voice was thin now. That's taken out of context. That phrase could mean, Kia, Jackson said. Kara stepped forward and tapped on her tablet. A recording began to play. Trevor's voice. Keep him under. Once the vote's done, the body can follow. He's a coma case. These things happen. Gasps. A silence so thick it seemed the room itself recoiled. Trevor lunged forward, face red, voice desperate. She's a nurse. She's not even qualified. I'm a forensic neurologist, Kara said flatly, certified in digital evidence preservation. Every recording, every reading is admissible. Diana followed with another blow. And here are wire transfers. Shell corporations tied to Dr. Voss, routed through a dummy account belonging to Trevor's father-in-law. Evelyn stepped back, her expression no longer mournful but cornered. Jackson turned toward her, his gaze soft but final. You sold your wedding ring 2 weeks after my crash, he said, voice hollow now. I was still fighting for breath, and you were already picking out new curtains. Security stepped into the room. Mr. Cole, the lead guard said gently, federal agents are waiting downstairs. Should we escort them down? Jackson didn't flinch. Please. As Trevor and Evelyn were led away, Trevor twisted to look back, face bitter. You're killing decades of work. Pulsecore will ruin every major backer we have. It's not charity, it's corporate suicide. Jackson stepped closer, eyes steady. It's not charity, he said. It's legacy. And with that, the doors closed. For a long moment, the boardroom was still. Jackson took the chair that had once been his, now reclaimed. He sat slowly, the weight of recovery etched in every breath. "I thought we'd lost you," Rebecca said softly, placing a hand on his shoulder. Jackson nodded, eyes glistening with restrained emotion. "I would have been," he said, "if not for someone who chose truth over silence, even when it could have cost her everything." He glanced toward Kara, who stood near the door, no longer just a nurse, but the reason he lived. But even now, he could feel it, the weight of something larger. Because Trevor and Evelyn, they were only the front line. Pulsecore had drawn the attention of something far more dangerous, and the war was just beginning. The press conference made national headlines within hours. Jackson Cole returns from coma, exposes corporate coup. Pulsecore project unveiled, energy for all or threat to the few. Cole versus the boardroom. David takes on the Goliaths of energy. For most people watching the broadcast, it was an inspiring comeback story. A tale of justice. A CEO cheated, poisoned, betrayed, now standing again, defiant in the face of corruption. But in one high-rise office in Washington, D.C., the broadcast meant something far more dangerous. A man in a charcoal suit stood by the window, his face bathed in the pale light of early evening. The screen behind him showed Jackson Cole speaking at the press podium, flanked by Kara, Rebecca, and Dr. Jensen. A voice came through his earpiece. Calm, refined, European accent. "He's alive." The man didn't flinch. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a thin cigar, and lit it with the ease of someone who never rushed. "He's alive," he said softly, "and he's not afraid." There was a pause on the other end of the call. Then came the reply. "Then neither are we." 3 days later, Kara stood on the balcony outside Jackson's office in San Diego, her hands wrapped around a mug of black coffee. The skyline was orange with dawn. She hadn't slept much. She heard the soft tread of his cane before he spoke. "You don't sleep much anymore," Jackson said, his voice low. "Neither do you," she replied. They stood in silence for a few seconds, both watching the sky. Jackson handed her a secure envelope. She opened it, revealing a detailed financial trace. "Rebecca got this from one of our private investigators," he said. "It confirms what we suspected. The money trail that funded Voss, the charter amendments, the offshore accounts, they all lead back to one source." Kara flipping through the papers. "Arsene Group," she read aloud. Jackson nodded. "A shadow network. Legally, it's a lobbying firm. In reality, it's a syndicate. They buy influence across energy, defense, and even black budget research. Their board includes former cabinet secretaries, foreign dignitaries, ex-intelligence heads." Kara's jaw clenched. They weren't just trying to stop Pulsecore, they were trying to control it. "Yes," Jackson said. "And when I wouldn't play ball, they tried to remove me." Kara handed the file back, her fingers brushing his. "So what now?" she asked. Jackson turned to face her fully. For a moment, he didn't look like the corporate titan or the injured survivor. He looked human, tired, thoughtful. "You walked into fire for me when I couldn't speak for myself," he said. "You chose truth over safety. I won't forget that." Kara held his gaze. "I didn't come this far to stop halfway." A long silence passed between them, filled only by the faint wind brushing through the city below. "Then we moved," Jackson said, "not just to protect Pulsecore, but to finish what I started." Later that day, a small group gathered in Jackson's private conference room. Rebecca Lang, Kara Miles, Dr. Jensen, and Diana Solis, his attorney. On the screen was a satellite image of a remote energy testing facility in Nevada, one of Novagrid's most secure off-the-books labs. Jackson leaned against the table as the image zoomed in. This facility was supposed to be where Pulsecore's prototype entered field testing, he said. It was built under tight NDAs, with double-blind engineering teams. No outside access. But 3 months ago, right after my crash, the site was taken over. Rebecca frowned. "Taken over by who?" "A subsidiary," Diana said. Shell Corporation, registered in the Cayman Islands, managed by Arsene-linked board members. "And they're already running tests," Kara added. "I found encrypted sensor data bouncing between that site and a classified node in Northern Virginia." Jackson looked around the room. They didn't just want Pulsecore buried. They wanted to modify it, weaponize it. Dr. Jensen raised an eyebrow. Weaponize clean energy? Not in the traditional sense, Jackson said. Pulsecore uses adaptive frequency modulation. In theory, it can be tuned to disrupt power grids or stabilize them. It could protect infrastructure from EMPs or take them down. Kara sat back. That's why they care. It's not just about energy, it's about control. Jackson nodded, and the minute I present the full specs to the public, our scene's leverage evaporates. They'll no longer control the tech or the narrative. That night, Jackson stared out the window of his office, the lights of the city stretching for miles like a web of veins pumping into the heart of a sleeping world. He had thought corporate politics was the battlefield. He had been wrong. This was war, not with bullets or borders, but with information, access, and truth. His phone buzzed, a single message from Rebecca. Whistleblower contact confirmed. Former Arsene analyst. Wants to meet. Jackson stared at the screen. A name followed, one he hadn't heard in over 15 years. He turned toward the door. Kara, he called out. She appeared in seconds. We have a new ally, but meeting them won't be safe. Kara tilted her head. Where? He glanced down at the screen again. Montana. The next morning, Jackson stood before the media once more. The room was packed. He adjusted the microphone, cleared his throat, and began. 3 weeks ago, I woke up in a hospital bed, unable to move, unable to speak. But I listened. I listened to the people I trusted plot against me, and I realized something. The world doesn't run on truth, it runs on power. He let the words hang for a beat. Pulsecore was never about making headlines. It was about making power affordable, available, and secure for everyone, not just the wealthy, not just the connected. He looked straight into the cameras. I won't back down, I won't sell out, and I won't stay silent, not anymore. In a glass tower 5 states away, the same man with the charcoal suit stubbed out his cigar and turned toward the darkness. So he wants a war, he muttered. His assistant stood frozen at the door. What should I tell the board, sir? The man straightened his tie and smiled thinly. Tell them Jackson Cole has declared himself a problem, and Arsene doesn't tolerate problems. It had been 1 week since Jackson Cole returned from the edge of death and reclaimed his name, his company, and the shattered pieces of his life. The building hum of Nova Grid headquarters sounded different now. The air felt heavier, but not with despair, with purpose. Kara Miles stood beside the whiteboard in the war room, marking new connections with red string and motes, satellite feeds, bank wires, a wall of names, half of which weren't on any public record. Behind her, Jackson reviewed the newest Pulsecore schematic. His cane rested against the table. He no longer leaned on it. He was standing, physically, legally, strategically. You sure about going public with the full specs? Kara asked without turning. Jackson nodded. If we wait, they'll twist it, bury it in red tape, turn it into something dark. He paused, then added, Pulsecore was never about beating the system. It was about replacing it. The press conference was streamed across 5 continents. Jackson stood at the podium in a navy blazer, no tee, a silver lapel pin shaped like a rising sun, Pulsecore's new emblem. This project, he began, started as a simple idea. What if we made clean energy accessible to everyone, not just those who could afford to lobby for it? He paused. The answer scared people. Behind him, Kara and Rebecca stood quietly. Dr. Nora Jensen monitored the feed from a secure uplink. A team of cybersecurity experts, hired anonymously by allies of Rebecca, protected the stream from tampering. Jackson continued, his voice gaining weight with each sentence. They tried to bury me because I said no. They tried to dismantle my company and my name because I wouldn't give them control. But Pulsecore isn't just a piece of technology, it's a declaration. He looked directly into the camera. A declaration that power doesn't belong to the powerful, it belongs to the people. He then unveiled a sleek black case, opened it, and pulled out a data drive. He held it up. This contains the open source blueprint for Pulsecore. As of this moment, It is no longer proprietary. It belongs to the world. Gasps echoed through the room. Reporters leaned forward, scrambling to confirm the upload appearing on government feeds, engineering forums, even MIT's open tech database. One reporter asked, "Mr. Cole, won't this cost Nova Grid everything?" Jackson smiled, calm, resolute. Legacy is more valuable than profit. You can inherit money. You can't inherit courage. Across the country, reactions were immediate. Some hailed Jackson as a hero, others a reckless idealist. But in living rooms across America, especially among older viewers, something deeper stirred. Veterans, retirees, farmers, and grandparents, people who had worked their whole lives and felt forgotten, recognized something in him. Not just the innovation, the conviction. That same week, donations poured into independent energy co-ops. Colleges formed task forces to build Pulsecore-based microgrids. A Native American reservation in Arizona announced a partnership with NovaGrid to power 1,200 homes without federal approval. The revolution had begun, not with noise, but with action. In his office that evening, Jackson watched the data feed tracking Pulsecore's downloads. Over 500,000 in just 24 hours. Kara entered quietly, setting down 2 cups of coffee, black, no sugar, the way they both took it now. "You did it," she said softly. Jackson shook his head. "We did it." They stood in silence, watching the world shift on the screen. Then Kara asked the question that had lingered since Montana. "Do you think our scene will back off?" Jackson's eyes narrowed, thoughtful. "No," he said finally. "They won't stop. They'll adapt. They'll spin it. They'll find another angle." Kara nodded slowly. "So, what now?" He turned to her, his voice gentler now, but firm. "Now we redefine the battlefield. Not just in tech, but in schools, cities, policy. We stop thinking like survivors and start acting like builders again." He looked at her. "I want you by my side, officially, Executive Strategy Director." Kara blinked, caught off guard. I'm not from this world." "You're exactly what this world needs," he said. "Integrity, clarity, fire." She smiled softly, then reached out her hand. He took it. "Then let's build," she said. In a darkened boardroom in DC, members of our scene watched the broadcast again in silence. An older man, his hands spotted with age and war medals, said, "We underestimated him." A woman with sharp cheekbones added, "He's given the world a weapon, whether he realizes it or not." A third figure, voice obscured by a modulator, spoke last. "Then it's time we adjust our strategy." They turned to the screen one last time, where Jackson stood against a backdrop of clean energy, towers rising in the desert. The war wasn't over, but the battlefield now belonged to the people. The road to the secluded meeting site in Bozeman, Montana was narrow and winding, flanked by pine-covered hills in the last stubborn snow of spring. Jackson Cole sat in the back of a modest SUV, staring out the window, his cane resting beside him. Kara sat in the front seat next to their driver, an ex-federal investigator Rebecca had quietly brought into the fold. No more limousines, no more armored sedans, just movement. Quiet, focused, and deliberate. They were meeting the whistleblower, someone who once worked deep inside our scene's data architecture, a man who claimed to have evidence of something more sinister than corporate espionage, something that made the attack on Pulsecore feel like a test run. They parked near a cabin set against the Rockies. A figure stood at the porch, mid-50s, bearded, wearing a faded navy jacket. His eyes were tired, but alert. "You're Jackson Cole?" the man asked. Jackson nodded, stepping forward carefully. The man exhaled. "Then you'd better come inside. What I have might change how you see the world." Inside, the air was thick with tension and wood smoke. Documents, drives, a terminal loaded with encrypted files. Over the next hour, Jackson and Carol learned the truth. Our scene's ambitions weren't just about energy. They were building a global digital leverage system, an invisible empire controlling infrastructure, data, and even elections through planted vulnerabilities in emerging technologies. In Pulsecore, it was supposed to be their foundation. Until Jackson said no. "They called it Project Sovereign," the man said, "an algorithm that could throttle or destabilize entire nations. No bombs, just switches, controlled through energy nodes like Pulsecore. Jackson's face darkened. Kara's hands curled into fists. They understood now. Pulsecore wasn't just a gift. It was a temptation, one Jackson had refused to let be weaponized. The man passed them a flash drive. "This is everything I have. The world will believe you. They won't believe me. But you, they're already listening to." 2 weeks later, Jackson returned to the stage, not for a product launch, but for a warning. The footage played across major networks and online platforms. "There are those," he said, "who would turn innovation into control, clean power into quiet coercion. We have proof, and we won't let it stand." He presented the whistleblower's files, placing them into public record. A special Senate hearing was announced within hours. Our scene, once untouchable, was now under scrutiny. That night, Jackson and Kara stood on the rooftop of Novagrid headquarters, looking out at the vast city below. "Do you think we've won?" Kara asked. Jackson shook his head gently. "No," he said, "but we've changed the game. That's how revolutions begin, not with fireworks, but with truth spoken out loud." She looked at him. "Do you ever miss the quiet?" He smiled. "Sometimes, but silence is what almost killed me. I'd rather live loud, even if it costs me." In a world that often rewards silence, Jackson Cole's story reminds us of the power of standing tall when it's easier to fade away. That integrity still matters, even when no one is watching, and that the quietest person in the room may be the one carrying the heaviest truth. For those of us who've lived long enough to know the cost of doing what's right, this story isn't just fiction, it's a reflection. Have you ever had to speak up when it was hard? Have you seen someone choose integrity over comfort? Share your story in the comments. You never know who you might inspire. And remember, it's never too late to choose legacy over silence, like Jackson Cole did, like you still can.